Diva Horja, Filter of Galer, welcome to everyone to the latest episode of Nationalist Discussion. Tonight I'm going to be joined by Eino Rantanen. He's going to be the one who will introduce himself. Eino, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience tonight?
Yes. Well, firstly, let me thank you for the invitation. It's certainly a pleasure to be here. My name is Eino Rantanen. I am the chairman, or more colloquially, the chief of Sinine Äratus, or in English, Blue Awakening, which is the affiliated youth movement of the Conservative People's Party of Estonia, more commonly known as EKRE. Now, I'm currently on my second term as the chairman. I've been a member of the organization for a couple of years now. It's, how would I say, it's taxing work, both physically and occasionally mentally as well, but it's all the more rewarding, really.
Yeah, that's very cool. Like it's our organizations are similar in the sense that we are both like youth organizations to Mother Party, and it's quite nice talking to my Estonian counterpart. Essentially, so like, what does your position entail? Like you said there that you were the chairman. Like does like our title over here, what we'd use would be Kianra, for example. Would it be? I'd say it'd be the similar position and job essentially.
Yeah, I would say so. Sort of my position, within the youth organization is most times it's organizing events, campaign actions, activism, things like that. Also, everyday administration. Pretty much everything. I mean, like, luckily we're a relatively small organization, so the chairman, I'm able to do a lot of stuff effectively. Within the party itself, I'm automatically, as the chairman of the youth wing, I'm a member of the party council. So I'm also the person responsible for the communication between the party and the youth wing. Because, like, in that role, I have a direct contact with the party chairman. I sort of, talk with him if we have some issues or propositions, things like that.
Yeah, and just for reference now to all our listeners and to those who will catch the catch up broadcast of it, EKRE is the third largest political party in Estonia at a national level at the moment. So this is very impressive. And what strategies does EKRE adopt, and what does that mean for your organization, Blue Awakening? What do you do differently? What dynamic do you adopt, basically?
Yeah, that's true. We are the third largest party in our parliament. We got 19 seats out of 101. Currently, in the opinion polls, we are actually the second largest. We're polling
epic,
just above 20% or so. I think the key to our success has been the fact that when we were founded, and still today, we are pretty much the only party that sort of is actively sort of going for the national right-wing conservative nationalist ideology. There is a second smaller party that is, how would I say, more sort of mainstream conservative nationalist. I mean, they're not. I mean, even though they're part of the EPP, they're not as cocked as you would think, and they do good stuff occasionally. But I would say that our party has quite effectively taken over the right-wing national populist vote in Estonia, and that is the key to the success of the party. And that of course sort of carries over to the youth wing as well. I mean, we are at the moment the biggest, most active, explicitly nationalist youth organization in the country. And I think I don't like to toot my own horn here, but for example, in the last elections, our party was the most popular in the 18 to 24 age group,
That's
and
brilliant.
I,
That's
I, I
brilliant.
think I think some of that success can be attributed to sort of our brand image. I mean, to give an example, like most of like pretty much or all other youth organizations are, their for example their names follow the a similar pattern. They're young Reform Party, young Centre Party, young whatever. But we are
Yeah.
called. I mean, we were actually called. Our initial name was called Young Conservatives, but then we sort of rebranded ourselves. Took on a new name. We took on the new sharp logo that we're known for, and
Yeah, your
that is all.
aesthetic is fantastic. Like I saw some of the pictures, and of course, the last Kianara Dahi Burka went over to Finland with an NP delegation, ON delegation, and bumped into a lot of you lads that were there, and they only had great things to say. And I saw some of the pictures and of yous, and it really is. It's a very crisp. It's a very good aesthetic that you have, and comparing to other more mainstream or not. Well, actually, you're the mainstream. Never mind. Like your party's the mainstream, but compared to the other your opponents, there is no comparison. You know, like they're playing around with MS Paint while you are doing some fairly impressive graphic design and aesthetics.
Well, thank you very much for the compliment. That is and has always been a conscious choice for us. That we want to create this sort of certain type of brand through aesthetics. That we show that we are different, both ideologically and organizationally. We try to show ourselves a bit more as radical and independently thinking. There's this a term in Estonia. It's called the political broiler, and it refers to, let's say, young people who are essentially groomed to become politicians in the future, and the youth wings are usually called broiler factories, and that is an image that we sort of really want to avoid. That we don't want simply to be seen as just a pipeline for young
Yeah.
people to make a career in politics. I mean, yes, we of course we provide that opportunity as well, but we've always wanted to be more than that. And
Yeah, well, I think you're doing a very good job. I think you're doing a very good job. And I saw, like, on your latest activism, that was it you and maybe a deputy chairman of yours was in the. I'm going to butcher this again. Amadai, the Rigi Oku, the
yeah,
your national parliament.
yeah, that's the Rigi Kogu. That was literal translation being state assembly. So yeah, it wasn't really activism per se. It was essentially just I don't know if you have a similar thing in Ireland, but literally youth parliament. And so we just went there to have some fun, maybe recruit some people. And it was an educational opportunity as well, because it's a parliamentary simulation, and you learn how that whole thing works. But I would say the latest piece of political activism that we did was just 2 days ago, really, and we organized a torchlight march to celebrate the anniversary of the Tartu Peace Treaty, which ended our War of Independence and sort of, ensured our status as an independent state. And so,
Yeah,
and
the pictures from that are fantastic as well. Like the aesthetic with the torches and everything looks great.
yeah, that is definitely something that is very strongly associated with us, and we're pretty much the only ones that can really do it at this point, because tortures using torches in political actions or things like that it's so us that no one else can really sort of get into that niche anymore. But yeah, I mean that was definitely like our latest political activism. But in general, what we try to focus on when we do political activism is sort of I like to call it capital intensive campaigning, meaning that since we're are a relatively small organization, we've always in our membership we've always focused more on quality than quantity, and that's one reason why we are smaller compared to the other big parties, youth wings. But what we want to do is like we have a certain level of input and a certain level of output, and things like let's say opinion art pieces for newspapers, or some sort of good-looking, snazzy poster, or even what we're actually very, very much known for in Estonia as political memes. So those can be those can be created with a a very small group of people, but they have a big reach and they have a big effect. And I mean, even nowadays, occasionally, I think the heyday for the political memes was during and before the last parliamentary elections, where we literally had like a very strong strategy of just creating and disseminating memes through different pages and things like that. And I would say it turned out to be very successful. It definitely left a mark in society, and we're still sort of I would say a moment of triumph for us. So yeah, in general, we try to focus on this sort of guerrilla tactics in the internet sphere, because we see that has the biggest effect with given our current situation. I mean, of course, we sort of participate in traditional campaigning and canvassing with the party. I mean, of course, we do that as well. But I think what we do focus on most and what gives us the best results is definitely being active online and just pushing our message through different mediums over the internet.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Like we also see similar in Ireland. It really has been a lot of the growth has been through sending out, whether it's tweets, posts on Instagram, posts on Facebook. That's where you get a lot of the growth, because everything now really is online. Like, you look around you, and most people now, they don't even use like cash, for instance. So everything is being done like through the internet or tap or whatever. So it's always good to utilize whatever means you can to get the message out. But speaking of canvassing, continue there.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's being online, being active online is really, really of utmost importance. Really, really, that it's literally everything about adapting to your current situation and making the most of the tools that are given to you.
Yeah,
but yeah,
that's exactly it.
Yeah,
you're just talking about the canvassing, the campaigning. Would I be correct in saying that there is an election coming up for you guys soon enough now?
Very correct. It's actually in 1 month to be
In
exact.
1 month.
Yeah. This is.
Would you like to tell us about it?
I'm ashamed to mention, but I can't remember now. Was it the? I think it was the 5th of March. I mean, I should know this, but I think the exact election day is the 5th of March. And then there's, of course, like a period of pre-election. But yeah, it's literally 1 month coming up. So yeah, it's been definitely a very, very busy time for us.
Yeah, I'd say so. Busy campaign and whatnot. How are things looking on the ground at the moment?
To be honest, things are looking all right. I think our party, we made a sort of conscious decision to, instead of having a very long campaign on the streets, we instead went for the approach that we're going to do a short and very intensive campaign. So far, when we've been out on the streets, both us, the party, and us, the youth wing, I would say the people's reception has been mostly positive. And unlike maybe some other countries in Western Europe, sort of the good side of Estonia is that uh, election campaigning is relatively peaceful. I mean, just you don't get harassed by the opposition or anything, so everything's very civil. Uh, there is a small disclaimer I have to make. Uh, I would say, like, a few months ago we were polling at 25 or even 27%. I mean, there have been situations where we were actually the most popular party according to the polls, but now we've sort of fallen slightly. But yeah, that's really something we have to keep working on during the street campaigns. But yeah, otherwise things are going pretty well in general. Nothing really bad to say. My personal opinion is that we should be out among the people on the streets a bit more, but yeah, I guess the election results will show everything. That's something that's important for us in Blue Awakening as well, is that we measure really our success. We measure our success through election results, and if we see, for example, that our support is high among the youngest voter demographic, then I would consider we would consider our activities to be a success.
Well, yeah, it is. It's the future. It's very impressive. What have been some of the main policy talking points that you've been using while canvassing and campaigning?
Yeah, I mean, these elections are, I would say, some of the most, or one of the most important in Estonian history, and the sort of the main rivalry is between us and the Reform Party, which is how would I say, socially liberal, economically neoliberal party. So those are our biggest rivals, and a lot of political scientists in Estonia have said something that I really agree with, is that everything really depends on who can dominate the topics of the political debate. Meaning, if the political debate focuses more on international or international issues, meaning security, defense, the issues concerning the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the geopolitical implications of that, our position in NATO, our position in the European Union, things like that. If those topics dominate the electoral debate, then it will be quite a strong victory for the Reform Party. Then again, if we can turn the debate onto domestic issues, here meaning the cost of living crisis, inflation, energy prices. At the moment, I think Estonia has the highest inflation in the OECD countries. It's over 20%, and it has been for many months now. So if we can turn the electorate's focus on those domestic issues, then I think the race will be much tighter. And maybe I'm a bit too much of a pessimist. I don't think we will manage to pull off a victory, but if we can sort of take the attention away from international issues where the Reform Party is very strong, and onto domestic issues where we are stronger, I think it will be much more of a contest. But yeah, I think those are the main issues dominating the Estonian political scene at the moment, and I'd have to say, compared to previous elections, whether they were national or local, I would say the polarization between different parties is much stronger, and the rhetoric is also much stronger than it used to be, which is to be expected, because every action has an equal reaction. The laws of physics apply here as well. But also, it sort of means that we're kind of losing our innocence. The politics is, becoming more American, but I guess it's just inevitable.
Yeah, well, that's the American empire's culture seeping into its spheres of influence. Like it's very same in Ireland. There is some very, like, things are getting quite interesting, to say the least, in Ireland at the moment, with all the protests going on, with just the way the political dynamic has shifted. I mean, you look at all the news, all the mainstream press, the line press, they'll all tell us that the far right and nationalists didn't exist 2 weeks ago, but now we're everywhere. Like, we are literally everywhere. And it's interesting to note how quickly the dynamic has shifted here in Ireland. Has it been like the same for you guys?
Yeah, that's true. Like, just about the things that you mentioned. I've been also following the situation in Ireland closely, and I have to say it is very impressive that, and also very surprising that these issues have come to the forefront very, very aggressively, and you have a lot of protests over there. So, and it's the effect and the reach of those events is definitely much larger than, let's say, your polling numbers might suggest. But yeah, could you just quickly repeat the question you had for me, meaning about the?
Well, I didn't really have a question. I was just making a statement. It's just the way that we didn't exist, and then 2 weeks later, now we're everywhere. We're everywhere. We need to, like, they need to do something. It's just really, really interesting how that dynamic has shifted. And also, something that adds to that in Ireland, I noticed, is because we're a small country, like, everyone kind of knows everyone to some degree. And I'd say it's very similar for you guys in Estonia.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. I mean, we are an even smaller country than you are, and I guess the fact that everyone knows everyone, maybe I mean, that's maybe a bit of an overstatement, but nonetheless, I mean, people are still, how to say, when it comes to interacting with people on the opposite side of the political spectrum, I would say things are much more civil than in perhaps other countries. I mean, I personally occasionally hang out with, let's say, people from the Greens or the Social Democrats or the sort of liberal parties, but I mean, we do disagree on a very fundamental level about politics, but nonetheless, we can be friendly and civil with each other. You mentioned the sort of the dynamics that have appeared in Ireland, that you've sort of come to the forefront pretty much overnight, and I think this is a difference between our organizations, in that when we do last year, we just our party and the youth wing as well, we celebrated our 10th anniversary, and back when we started in 2012, I mean, we were essentially sort of we were totally marginal, really, and we sort of built our way up from there, and we sort of started very slowly inching upwards in the opinion polls. And I think then the big break was the migrant crisis. Really, I mean, that sort of shut us up, really, because we're pretty much the only sort of voice of opposition to the liberal consensus. And after the 2015 parliamentary election, we got our first seats, 7 seats, and since then we've sort of, again, we had this sort of big breaking point, but on both sides of that breaking point, it has been sort of this incremental growth, really. I mean, people more and more realize that we are pretty much the only alternative to what we call the liberal consensus over here.
Yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's better to do things slowly and correctly than to do it fast and wrong, because if you do fast and wrong, that could cost you everything. So there's no problem with doing it slowly. I think that's a very smart move that your party's leadership and whatnot have adopted. I think that's very good.
Yeah, the reason there is a small caveat to that. I mean, in the last couple of years, I think we've sort of tried to focus too much, or the party at least has focused too much on rapid growth and trying to, represent as many interest groups as possible. That sort of has, I would say, slightly backfired in many ways because, for example, with the COVID issue, I mean, a lot, or large numbers in the party took a really strong stance against, vaccinations and COVID passports and things like that. But then again, even within the party, that was quite a divisive issue, and that sort of cost us. Then you have the slight, I don't even know what to call it, but these slight overtures towards the Russian-speaking minority, due to shared social conservatism. That slightly backfired, and I mean, and then there's also the issue that let's say if you look at party membership numbers, it's always nice to have as big a number as possible, but then again, just being a big party shouldn't be a goal in and of itself, because that things like unsavory elements joining, that sort of thing starts to happen.
Yeah.
So the situation is not ideal, but I want to mention these things because you guys in Ireland are still in your growth phase, and I would say that don't repeat the mistakes of others.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Don't worry, we'll take your advice into account. But tell us, has there been any? You were speaking there briefly about the immigration crisis. What has that been like in Estonia? Because right now in Ireland, it's really at the forefront of debate. Like, everyone's talking about it. It's the go-to issue, as well as housing, of course. But of course, they're kind of intertwined. But tell us, how has that been in Estonia?
Yeah, I mean, immigration, as I mentioned, since 2015 has been a big topic, mainly thanks to us. I mean, before we were, in the public sphere, no one really talked about that issue. But it's still a very big thing, and now as well, due to the very large numbers of Ukrainian refugees arriving over here. I mean, with Estonia, there's an important thing to remember about our demographics. I mean, just like with the Irish people, similarly, due to the potato famine, it's a similar situation here in Estonia, that the population of ethnic Estonians hasn't reached pre-World War II levels, either in terms of absolute numbers or as a share of the population. And then of course you add in the occupation by the Soviet Union for 40 plus years, and like literal colonization through the Soviet authorities just brought in hundreds of thousands of Russians. And so we already were in a very precarious situation. I mean, currently or actually I would say before the war in Ukraine, Estonians were, or actually I would turn this around, Russian speakers or non-Estonians formed about a quarter, or a bit over a quarter of the population of the country. And now it's actually gotten even worse, to be honest, mainly due to the Ukrainian refugees. The situation with them isn't really, as it's not as big of an issue, since most of them, they have been sort of polled and asked about their intentions. I mean, large majority of them intend to leave when the war is over. So, that's all right. But nonetheless, I mean, we've had also like tens of thousands of Russians, not Ukrainians, just Russians coming from Russia to Estonia, whether to, escape mobilization or just wanting to leave the shithole that Russia really is. But yeah, it's definitely been an issue for a long time. It's still at the forefront. It's a really big issue. And I would say pretty much the only difference between Estonia and Ireland in this matter is just what is the ethnicity of the arrivals that are creating this issue. I mean, we had, for us it's Russians or Eastern Slavs mostly, and you know people sort of criticize us for focusing on immigration a lot, but our answer has always been that since our party and the youth wing, we base pretty much all of our policies in some way or another on the preamble of the Estonian constitution, wherein one sentence says that the ultimate or the most important mission of the Estonian state and the people who run it is to ensure the survival of the Estonian ethnicity, the Estonian language, and the Estonian culture throughout the ages. And allowing these massive levels of immigration that we've experienced in the last years is just totally contradictory with that goal. I mean, the constitution is something that every single Estonian citizen is obligated to be loyal towards. You need to fill that goal. It's not an option, it's an order that you have to fulfill. And I find it to be really perverse that the other political forces sort of don't see mass migration as an issue, because how can we fulfill that goal of the survival and the thriving of the Estonian nation, our language, our culture, if our country is no longer majority Estonian? Because communities are basically the sum of its people, and there's no point in talking about integration if there's no majority people to integrate to. And it's people, like politicians always talk about how are we going to integrate the Russian speakers, and they come up with different ideas. Recently it was a law was actually finally passed that the education system in Estonia should be unilingual Estonian, so no more Russian speaking schools. But then again, allowing thousands or even tens of thousands of non-Estonian immigrants is just completely counterproductive. And so to conclude, immigration has been an issue for a very long time. We are in I would say, very precarious demographic situation in Estonia, and that is why we always, or constantly, we keep talking about it, even though we're being criticized for it.
Well, you're absolutely right too, because here's just the fact of the matter is that the smaller the country is, the quicker the change can take place. Ireland, for example, has changed very quickly in a short amount of time, and I'd say it could be even worse for Estonia with the levels of immigration that are just coming into Europe. I mean, realistically speaking, Germany and France can handle it to a degree. They won't see it. It took them 50 years to see craziness and chaos break out on the streets of Paris and Berlin, Frankfurt, etc. But Ireland, it took no more than 20. It took no more than 20, and we're already starting to see the chaos that we're seeing on the streets, and the Irish people are speaking out about it. And I'd say for Estonia, which is an even smaller country, again, the change can be really, really rapid, and a lot of people don't understand this.
Yeah, I mean, and sort of the worst part is that the current situation, we have a very large Russian-speaking minority. It was forced upon us by a foreign occupier with imperialist ambitions, very similar to Ireland as well. And because before World War II and the subsequent Soviet occupation, the population of Estonians was over 1 million in absolute terms, ethnic Estonians. As a percentage of the population, it was something like 85%, a bit over that. And then you had Soviet occupation, which entailed, in addition to deportations and executions and whatnot, it also entailed a sort of systematic colonization, especially in our cities. And so, by the time the Soviet Union started collapsing, the percentage of Estonians, the number of Estonians, the percentage of our population had decreased to just over 60% or something like that. So it was, it's luckily it sort of went down because a lot of Russians emigrated. Estonians moved back who had fled, moved back from abroad, but nonetheless, it's still something. The demographic legacy of the Soviet Russian occupation is still something that we're heavily struggling with, and it's really limited our potential as a nation. Starting from simple economics, but also going into these more spiritual issues, such as the feeling of national unity and things like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very similar for us. I mean, like, you just look up at the original plantation up in the Six Counties and look at the disaster that has caused. A good portion of our territory occupied and replaced by Anglo occupiers. And you can see how that legacy has left Ireland. It has left Ireland partitioned.
Absolutely. I mean, in Estonia, the Russian-speaking minority is very concentrated, but this is one very good example that as the island of Ireland, in the northeast of Estonia, there's the third largest city in our country called Narva. Basically, what happened there is it was a Estonian city before World War II. But when the front lines closed in 1944, the Germans evacuated the population because they knew there was going to be a huge battle there. But then, after the war, when the Soviets had occupied the country, they refused the original inhabitants to return. They pretty much leveled the city. A lot of it was pretty much rubble, but basically the Soviets took a huge bulldozer, built literally commie blocks into place, and populated the city exclusively with Russians. So essentially, Estonian city became a Russian city pretty much overnight. And again, it's still very much a majority Russian city. I think close to 90% of the population is ethnically Russian. And as I mentioned previously, this the demographic legacy of the Soviet occupation is really, really taxing on Estonia, and that is a major reason why we keep the immigration discussion in Estonia at the forefront, because we cannot allow mass migration from either Eastern Slav countries like Russia or Ukraine or Belarus, but also from the third world like India, Bangladesh, Nigeria, wherever.
Yeah,
we cannot allow that if we haven't solved our existing demographic issues first, at the very least.
And you think has there been a consolidated block? Because as you know, in our in the occupied Six Counties in the north east of Ireland, they have their own kind of political apparatus. All these cultural apparatus that they have that was given to them by the crown. Of course, what would there be a similar dynamic to that in that city that you're talking about?
Slightly, I would say. The situation with the Russian minority is, it's really complicated, and I could talk about it for probably hours on end. But sort of in a simplified fashion, is that it's sort of divided into two arguably free camps. So the first camp is the old generation that came here during or came here or were brought here during the Soviet times. These elderly boomers, who are usually nostalgic for the Soviet Union. Those people are, I would say definitely pro-Russia in their outlook, in the sense that they watch Russian media, they support Vladimir Putin. They're definitely disloyal to the Estonian state. But thankfully that sort of group is essentially slowly dying out. Then there's the third group who aren't really, or second group that aren't really sort of pro-Estonia per se, or at least they don't share the view, or the view that Estonia should be a nation state, which is, again, in the constitution, it should be a fact and everyone should accept it, but they really don't. But then again, they're not really pro-Russia either, because they know that their quality of life is so much better in Estonia that they sort of don't really actively, see themselves as pro-Russia. And then there's the sort of the third camp, which is, mostly composed of younger generations of Russian speakers that tend to be, or usually are loyal to Estonia. They speak the language very well. They integrate well into the rest of society. So, in sort of very simple terms, I would say that's the situation in among the Russian minority, and also the city of Narva that I mentioned. Of course, these groups aren't really monoliths. I mean, there's of course there's overlapping between the groups and ages and things like that. But that's the situation in general terms.
And do you think that the Russian invasion of Ukraine, do you think that has emboldened a lot of this pro-Russian minority in Estonia, or is it a bit different?
Well, I would say the situation, the result or the effect of the Russian invasion has been the opposite of what you mentioned. Meaning that a lot of Russian speakers either sort of condemn it. These are mostly, sort of the younger or more liberal cosmopolitan Russians, but nonetheless. And also, I would say the pro-Russian contingent, they know if they sort of openly come out with pro-Russia stances or things like that, the social condemnation will be so strong that they will, how to say, theoretically speaking, they will be, driven out of the village with pitchforks and torches. There are definitely a lot of people among the Russian minority who have a pro-Russian view, but they're sort of, how to say, quote unquote smart about it. They're keeping a very low profile because they know if that they sort of openly espouse these ideas, they know that they will be so broadly condemned and ostracized by the rest of Estonian society that they don't see it as worth it. So and that's actually, it's a similar situation in all of the Baltic states, really, that this has sort of created an opportunity for much more nationalistic policies in, let's say, education, language policy, even immigration policy. So, I think we still haven't seen the full effect, but we see it as a good opportunity to sort of push more nationalistic messaging.
Yeah, and what would be, if, speaking of policy, what would be your party's policy if they were to achieve, hypothetically, of course, a majority government in a month's time? Some of the key policy points, of course.
Yeah, I think the key policies will focus on three things. One is the cost of living crisis. Second is, security and defense, and the third is demographics. With the cost of living crisis, I mean, it's mostly as a result of inflation, but also a result of very high energy prices. I mean, those are things that are mostly sort of beyond the control of the Estonian government. However, we've very clearly stated that there are policies that we can take to sort of mitigate the negative effects, and some of them are, for example, lowering the excise duties on fuel, such as Poland has done before, to just bring down the prices, because fuel prices don't just affect like your personal driving; it also affects logistics. Then when it comes to, let's say, electricity, we've said that for example, the Estonian state energy provider has had like literally a growth in profits that's measured in thousands of percents, and taking some of that profit and perhaps supporting people who are struggling with their energy bills. And another thing is that some of our energy producing infrastructure has actually been mothballed because of the green transition that the Liberal government really wants to do. So we reactivate that. We take out the CO2 quota from electricity production in order to just drive the prices down, stimulate the economy, just to achieve the result that businesses won't go bankrupt, people will have more money in their pockets, their savings won't be eaten out by the inflation and whatnot. Moving on to security and defense, our policy for a long time has been, still is, that even though we are a part of NATO and we should remain as such, in order to have strong allies protecting our back, but we sort of cannot be complacent in our own defense, meaning that we have to, pretty much by any means necessary, we have to develop our own defensive capabilities as much as we can. So these entail things like mid-range anti-aircraft capabilities, raising the size of the wartime military to 55,000 men, focusing a lot also on civil protection, things like bomb shelters, and having clear plans for, let's say, evacuation of population centers, building up an armored unit, literally tanks. At the moment we don't have any. So yeah, literally just in the realm of defense, we shouldn't really just blindly rely on NATO. We should also, do as much as we can ourselves. And the third thing being, of course, immigration and demographics. Our policies are essentially, when it comes to, let's say, the Ukrainian refugees, our aim should be clear that, yes, we will give them temporary protection. We should do it. From one perspective, it's a moral obligation in a way, but also, Ukraine is a friendly country towards us. We should help those people. But whenever that is, when peace is achieved, we should incentivize these people to return back to Ukraine, since what our liberal government is currently doing. Their aim seems to be that they want to make as many Ukrainians stay here as possible, try to integrate them as much as we can. So, our party, we don't want to outsource the solving of our demographic issue to foreigners. So yeah, we want to focus on, incentivizing the return of Ukrainians to Ukraine, because, they, of course, they will need their own people more than we do, especially after a destructive war. But then, on the immigration front in general, I'd say, again, sort of limiting immigration as much as possible, raise the salary requirements for people coming to work in Estonia, things like that. So those are the three main topics and the associated policy points that, we really heavily emphasize on in the coming elections. And, and those are the things that we want to, I think, are the biggest things that we would do if we manage to form a government with us at the top.
Yeah, that was fairly well laid out right there. Very interesting policy points. I like them. I hope the listeners enjoyed it too. That's it for our questions on my end, though. So I think we'll end up wrapping it up. I'll let you have a last word, but on behalf of Náisiúnta and of course the National Party, we'll wish you the very best of luck in your upcoming elections in a month's time. But I'll let you have the last word if you want to say anything.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the good wishes. And again, I want to thank you very much for having me on. I hope people enjoyed or were interested in what I had to say. And also on behalf of Blue Awakening and of course ECRA, we wish you in Ireland also the best of luck, and anything you need, help, support with something, we will do whatever we can to help you guys and help you succeed. And I am confident that in, I don't know how many will it take months or will it take years, but you guys will become the equivalent of ECRA in Ireland as well.
Absolutely. Thanks a million. Well, there you go. Eino Rantanen, the chairman of Blue Awakening. Thanks a million for coming on. It's been great having you. Very interesting discussion. All right.
Likewise. Thanks for inviting me on.